On the other hand, it was established that the great majority of bombs dropped from 3,000 feet and above with instantaneous fuses would probably function satisfactorily. Final evaluation of the munitions was made in squadron drop tests from altitudes above 3,000 feet. Intervals between ships and intervalometer settings were selected to give contamination densities of 50 and 100 tons per square mile with each munition. In these final tests, chemical sampling instruments and test animals were both used. However, since mustard gas is somewhat more active and the human skin probably is more sensitive under tropical conditions, false conclusions might have been reached had results been judged on a comparison of chemical sampling data with physiological effects obtained in laboratory tests in the States. Therefore, final results were checked by the effect of the gas on personnel whenever it could be done without endangering their lives. About 500 bombs were dropped from above 3,000 feet, and the number of high tree bursts was negligible. Both munitions functioned in a highly satisfactory manner. Mustard-filled shells of the 4.2-inch chemical mortar and the 105mm howitzer were also tested. Each munition proved to be satisfactory. Due to the greater capacity of the 4.2-inch chemical mortar shell as compared to the 105mm howitzer shell, fewer rounds are needed to lay down the same quantity of mustard gas. However, the greater range and flexibility of fire of the 105mm howitzer makes it a valuable weapon for this purpose. The vapor yield from both the air and ground munitions is high under tropical conditions. That is, on jungle-covered terrain with high humidity and high temperature. Judging from what is known of the physiological effect of varying concentrations, a comparatively light contamination density of only 50 tons per square mile will cause serious casualties to the majority of troops protected only with the gas mask, as are the Japanese, if they are in the area within 3 hours after the bombardment. On the other hand, this high vapor yield makes the gas less persistent, and it would be safe for completely unprotected troops to traverse the area 48 hours after the bombardment. This whole series of tests indicated that with present persistent gas-filled munitions on jungle-covered terrain in the tropics, the vapor effect for the first 6 hours will be very great, but that no present standard U.S. munition is very persistent under tropical conditions. Non-persistent gas can be used with less restrictions by an army on the offensive. As we are constantly attacking in the Pacific theater, this series of tests was planned with a threefold purpose. First, to compare the effectiveness of phosgene and the new gas CK under tropical conditions. Second, to test the functioning of both air and ground non-persistent gas munitions on jungle-covered terrain. And finally, to test the practicability of breaking Japanese gas mask canisters with CK and the determination of how our own latest canister stands up to this gas under tropical conditions. These tests started by assessing the relative values of single bombs filled both with phosgene and the CK gas, as to initial concentration setup, drop-in concentration with the travel of the cloud, and in canister penetrating properties. Gas concentration recording instruments developed by the NDRC in the laboratories of the California Institute of Technology made it possible to arrive at a more accurate determination than was formerly possible. Unmasked goats and goats protected by masks fitted with Japanese and German, as well as British and our own canisters, were used as a check. Canister tests were made also with the mechanical breather, which draws air through a canister in the same average quantities and at the same average number of inhalations per minute as does a man. From these initial tests was determined the desired spacing of bombs to maintain a lethal concentration throughout an area. The best ground pattern was worked out and checked by small-scale multiple bomb static tests. These results were translated into Air Force operating procedure. It was established that phosgene is much inferior to the new gas CK in the jungle, as phosgene is quickly absorbed by the lush jungle growth, and the concentration drops off quite rapidly as the cloud travels. On the other hand, very little CK is lost by absorption, and therefore its cloud has a greater range of travel at an effective concentration. Final results of the air munitions were judged on 6 drop tests conducted by a squadron of B-24 bombers of the 6th Air Force operating from the Rio Hatta Strip on the Isthmus. Bombardments were conducted for each agent on 6 consecutive days under varying weather conditions. The overall picture thus obtained established beyond reasonable doubt the superiority of CK over phosgene on jungle-covered terrain. After each shoot, the recorded concentrations and the results on test animals were plotted on a map of the target area. From studies of this map, it was determined that a given amount of CK will produce a lethal area about 3 times the size of the lethal area which can be set up by a like quantity of phosgene. On concentrations that can be set up in the jungle, the canister breaking quality of the new gas CK was very pronounced. The Japanese canister proved to be the poorest one tested. Goats wearing the Japanese canister were killed by the new gas CK when tied or penned on the surface of the ground. Finally, dugouts were gas-proofed by usual field methods, and goats wearing Japanese canisters were placed in them behind gas-proof curtains. Within a few minutes after the cloud of CK reached the dugouts, it had penetrated the gas proofing, broken the Japanese canisters, and killed the goats wearing them. On the other hand, the ability of the latest U.S. canister to resist CK in concentrations practicable to set up over any considerable area was well established. CK-filled ammunition was tested in the 4.2-inch chemical mortar to determine whether the characteristic of the munition was suitable for such a filling and to study the munition's functioning. 2 night bombardments were fired on the same target with weapons of a chemical combat battalion during favorable weather conditions on 2 successive evenings. Each mortar fired 35 rounds in each bombardment. The test was held in the middle of the rainy season, and some difficulty was encountered in keeping the mortars accurately laid in the soft ground for a burst of 35 rounds. As this condition may often be expected in the tropics, valuable data in technique was acquired. Even with the mediocre performance of the mortar mounts due to insufficient backing for base plates, highly satisfactory results were obtained. The impact area consisted of 4 artillery squares, over which and around which sampling instruments and test animals were placed. By impacting on 4 artillery squares, a canister breaking concentration was set up on 12 squares and a lethal concentration on 38 squares. The effectiveness of such a weapon is apparent against troops dug in or in caves and safe from everything except direct hits by HE shells equipped with delay fuses. By firing CK on a target of 4 units in area, a Japanese canister breaking concentration would be set up on an area of 12 units, which is 3 times as large. and on an area of 38 units, or 9 1/2 times the size of the impact area, a lethal concentration would be set up which would kill a Jap whose mask leaked or who failed to get it on in time. From these tests of both air and ground munitions, it was established that CK is a very effective agent in the jungle. And in considering the relative ability of the Japanese gas mask and our own gas mask to protect against CK, it is apparent that even if the Japanese have this new gas, its use by both sides would be to our advantage. This can best be illustrated by a close-up view of the effect of this gas. Cameras were placed at close range to record what happened and were operated by remote control from a safe distance. The goat on your left is equipped with a U.S. Army canister containing charcoal which has been treated with the ASC catalyst, the method of treatment and formula for which are secret. The goat in the middle is wearing a Japanese Army canister. The goat on your right is unprotected. The middle goat with the Jap mask refused to face the firing squad, as you can see. He is only sulking and is just as healthy and just as much alive as the others, for the time being. Now the new gas begins to break the Japanese canister. Both the unprotected goat and the middle goat wearing the Jap canister were killed by the CK. Protected by his U.S. Army canister, the goat on the left was unaffected. He was placed in the veterinary hospital under observation for 3 days following the test, during which time he developed no ill effects, thus proving that Allied troops protected by the latest U.S. canisters would be unharmed by a concentration of CK sufficient to penetrate Japanese canisters and cause heavy casualties.